follow Jesus means to sacrifice your whole self, even if it means to lay down your life.
Take, Lord, receive all my liberty, my memory, understanding, my entire will.
I don't think suffering in itself has any particular value. In fact, Jesus spent most of his life trying to alleviate suffering. A lot of his healing that we hear described in the gospel is the healing ministry of Jesus, relieving people of their awful pain. But what Jesus teaches us by his very life is that suffering can have a great value if we offer it to the Lord to use that suffering. As we can see, Christ on the cross, I believe that was his greatest sermon he ever preached. Nothing spoke louder and clearer than this example of perfect love where he laid down his life for us. I've never experienced physical suffering like I have with this cancer. And yet, I want to add, that isn't the worst suffering. The worst suffering is the emotional suffering, the feeling like I'm dying and I don't want to die.
It was around Halloween of 1998 I was diagnosed, and they diagnosed me with stage 1 breast cancer. I had surgery followed by chemotherapy, radiation. My brother, Father Jim, unknowingly at the time had cancer. He was diagnosed in '99, right around the 4th of July. In fact, it was July 6th, with stage 4 kidney cancer.
I went to my doctor and learned that I had renal cell cancer that had already metastasized to my lungs and therefore is considered the 4th stage. And that he informed me of the very hard fact that once renal cell cancer had metastasized, it is rarely cured. And so I learned that I had this terminal disease.
It's an incredible gift that my cancer was detected early. And it almost seems how paradoxical. But my cancer was the size of a walnut, and his cancer was the size of a basketball. But they found mine, and they didn't find his.
I hate surgery. I hate hospitals. I hate suffering. This is the irony for me, is that I'm not good with suffering. Why then God would allow me to go through so much pain really bewilders me and frankly angers me. I have to admit, that's my natural instinct reaction. I hate suffering, but yet I also have seen again and again and again what the Lord is teaching me is that there is a greater blessing in the suffering in terms of what I've been saying about leading us closer to Christ. Nothing has led me closer to Christ than my cross of cancer. In fact, to remind me of that, I carry this cane to help me walk every day, and I have placed a crucifix at the base of this cane to remind me every time I pick it up, I'm picking up my cross and walking with the Lord. It's there to help me to accept this cross, this cancer, believing that the Lord will achieve more through this suffering than any of my preaching.
And what Jim has found is that God and the Spirit of the risen Christ is working through him much stronger now because he's not in the way. You know, he can really share from his heart, and not just what Scripture says, but what living his life says.
In the moment I began to identify my cancer as my cross, it took on a whole new meaning, a meaning that really helped make all the difference in my life.
You know, the crucified Christ is a central part of our Christian faith. And to remember that is to never forget that Christ suffered, and suffered for us, and that there's a redemptive value in our suffering. And that's what I'm learning from Jim. To suffer joyfully, to find, you know, God's will in that, it's powerful, it's transforming, and hard.
When one suffers with the intensity that Jim is suffering, it brings up a wide variety of emotions, and there's an incredible vulnerability in the midst of that. Frequently, in the midst of that suffering, people make a choice to just sort of put up the mask or put up the wall and say, come no further. The gift that Jim has given to his parish, the gift that Jim has given to his family, and the gift that Jim has given to me is to let down the wall and to see the real man in the midst of the suffering. Not unlike the way that Cardinal Bernardin bared his soul in his book, The Gift of Peace. It's a rare person who can trust in the grace of God in the midst of the suffering. When we feel angry, when we feel frightened, when we feel less than holy, to allow ourselves to be seen in that condition takes incredible trust and faith.
That's what I'm learning from Jim and his weakness, is that, you know, the only thing that matters is Jesus' love for you and your love for him, and how you're able then to serve other people.
It's very painful to see him suffering, but at the same time, I know that the Lord is preparing him for a greater reward than he could ever get on earth. And through his suffering, so many people have been brought to Jesus, including my husband, who was not Catholic, and last year came into the church largely because of Father Jim's just evangelism here in this parish and elsewhere.
All over our country, and maybe even all over the world, how many more people pray on a daily basis because of Father Jim's illness? Because of his illness, we all pray a whole lot more every day. And I can speak for myself and say, I pray harder and more fervently every day because of my feelings for Father and what he is teaching me as we go along here.
I pray more now, and not just intercessory prayer for Jim, but because I've prayed for Jim so much, I find my prayer life being strengthened as a result of that. I pray the rosary now, daily, and miss it if I don't.
We're a religious family. We always pray together daily as a family in our home. Come 9 o'clock at night, our family always gathered together to pray, and no matter who was there, they would join in. And through those prayers, we got to know their friends and would-be spouse someday, and it was just a great blessing that we had. But now through Jim's suffering, I tell you, there isn't a time we gather without saying a prayer, and a special prayer for Jim. And it's brought us much closer.